I have pondered that question for many months, and I don't have an answer. But I've also pondered this. If you wanted to use emergencies, if you were that kind of person, if you were a radical, and God forbid you wanted to take control of a country because it was the right thing to do, the people were too stupid. In an emergency situation, what would you need control of? How would you do it? How could you make sure that you could just lock everything down? You could control it, and then you could transform it. This is just a list I've come up with. I mean, I don't know. Manufacturing and industry, financial, media, communications, the military, energy, and education. Got it? Education is really more long-term. I know this is crazy talk to be even talking about command and control, but we have to think out of the box here in this way. If I would have asked you, how fragile was your freedom, if I asked you that question on September 10th, 2001, how fragile do you think our country is? You would have laughed at me for even asking. You would have said, oh, no, we're fine, that's great. How about if I asked you that on September 11th or 12th? What would your response be? Let me ask you that question today. How fragile is our country? How fragile is our system and your freedoms? Are we becoming more free or less free? Better yet, how secure and strong is the republic? If you've listened to me on the radio for the last 5 years, you've heard me explain a theory that I've had, and I've hoped I was wrong a long time, but it seems to be coming together, called the perfect storm theory. It's this theory, and all of these stories I just told you about all kind of fit in, and I hope I'm wrong, but it is coming more and more accurate every day, and here it is. We will be overwhelmed with financial, debt, security, energy, political problems, and then there would come a time where someone would say, now. And there'd be a blow. One emergency or crisis that would change the world as we knew it, and it would put our most sacred freedoms to the test. It would test those people that would like to use a crisis to take freedoms away. Now, I've never had in that perfect storm theory that we would have anybody step up to a dictator, and I don't think we are going to have that, and I hope to God we don't. But I'm concerned about a couple of things because of what I know about history. So before I get to that, let me go through these key areas here. If you wanted to have command and control, if you needed to control it, you'd need to do manufacturing and industry, right? You've got to control things like GM, Chrysler. You got to gobble up as much, not that you want to, but gobble up as much as you can. Then you control labor. If you control labor, you control industry. Well, guess who controls labor? Unions. Unions have more power than the average American. You know it and I know it. The #1 visitor in the White House is Andy Stern, the president of SEIU. Whose concerns are getting addressed first, his or yours? Let Barack Obama answer that one for you.
You will know who's on your side because I've been at this a long time. I've spent my entire adult life working with SEIU. I'm not a newcomer to this.
You know, let me go down to the next one. Energy. You know, wait until you see at the bottom of the hour. Global warming rates, dead last among the issues of the day with the American people. Dead last. But cap and trade is in the new budget. Wait until I show you the game. At the bottom of the hour, the president is putting phantom profits into the budget from an energy policy we're nowhere near, close to passing. What does he know that I don't know? I mean, I don't want to hurt Mother Earth, and I don't think you do. But yet, they're going to force us to go green. How? Cap and trade. Watch.
Under my plan of a cap and trade system, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket.
What is that going to do to our financial system? And speaking of financial system, let's look at the banks. A lot of these banks didn't want the bailouts. They were forced to take them. The bailouts of not only the banks, but the auto industry, TARP, Wall Street, stimulus. Government now holds a gun to a lot of people's heads in the financial industry, and they're demanding reform. Demanding reform that Europe won't do. By the way, reform is just a nice way of saying government control, capping salaries, windfall profits tax, deciding which investments are risky and which ones aren't. Obama says he does this reluctantly, but it doesn't matter. When hard times hit, he has and will use big government. How about media and freedom of speech? How about the internet? Any network who doesn't get the thrill up their leg when listening to the president is harshly declared not a news network. The diversity czar at the FCC wants people to, quote, step down so someone else can have power, end quote. President Obama has tried to intimidate TV pundits as an enemy of reform in the State of the Union address. And boy, look what they are trying to do to the internet. Grab power. Education. They're nationalizing the student loan industry. That's part of this. And education. Now, education is much longer term. Now, this would mean that from cradle to grave, the state would have a grip on our educational system, already loaded with anti-capitalist propaganda, progressive revisionist history, the Obama indoctrination that I'll show you in the next segment, Organizing for America. Wait until you see what's being handed out for your kids at school. It is absolutely unbelievable. And if you don't like what the public school is teaching, don't you dare argue for school vouchers, because the teachers would then have to compete. They're shutting them down. In normal times, it would be outrageous to think anyone in our government, anyone, would want to fundamentally transform us into anything but a better, freer society as our Constitution dictates. But we're not living in normal times. The world is changing right before our eyes and moving under our feet. These changes, this grab of power, has not been, and I want to make this clear, happening just in this presidency. Where were all of the people that were lined up on the left who were screaming about the Patriot Act and how you can't give these people any more power? You were worried about Bush, as was I. I at least joined you the last 4 years of his presidency. Grabbing power, abusing it, gathering too much strength. You were right. Now where are you? Stand by your principles. Because the reason you were right was not because a Republican was in power. And the reason why I'm concerned is not now because it's a Democrat in power. It's the word power. If you're one of those people who can say, oh, it can never happen in America, I want you to remember some of the radicals the president has placed around himself and some of the things that those radicals have said. Watch.
We're trying to use the power of persuasion. And if that doesn't work, we're going to use the persuasion of power.
No, we're going to change the whole system. We're going to change the whole thing. We're not going to put a new battery in a broken system. We want a new system.
We kind of agree with Mao that political power comes largely from the barrel of a gun.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste.
We took names. We watched how they voted. We know where they lived.
These are the people advising our president. You know about his other influences as well, Jeremiah Wright and Bill Ayers. Unthinkable, unthinkable that someone, in a time of crisis, someone might approach the president and say what the journalistic, revered, progressive Walter Lippmann said to FDR when things went down in 1933. He said this, "The situation is critical, Franklin. You may have no alternative but to assume dictatorial powers." FDR, thanks goodness, made the right choice. He didn't turn into a dictator. But Americans knew how close they were by the end of his administration to getting one. I found this old book in a bookstore the other day. It's from 1935, Hell Bent for Election. It was written by a former economic advisor to FDR. His name was James Warbug. He said this. See if this sounds anything like our president or what's going on now. He has carried out his promises where it mattered least and failed to do so where it mattered most. He brought about a certain amount of hasty reform of our banking and investment system. The problem is by no means solved and requires careful study in order that the much-needed real reform may someday be accomplished. On the negative side, he failed to reduce the cost of the federal government, to balance the budget, to maintain a sound currency, to take the government out of business, or maintain the fundamental principles of the American order. He has led us, speaking of FDR, into an orgy of wild spending undreamed of in prior administrations, piled up commission on commission and bureau on bureau to set up or tried to set up a federal dictatorship over all the various factors that affect the lives of our citizens. He has flouted the Constitution, which he swore to hold up. He has made a laughingstock of the sanctity of the national promises, and he has all done this in the name of an emergency. That's FDR. This is one of FDR's advisors that wrote that. This is why 2 years after FDR's death, 2 years, Congress passed the 22nd Amendment to officially limit the president to 2 terms because whether Lippmann said it or not, Americans could sense it. We're headed towards a dictatorship. I don't know if you sense that today or not. I hope you don't. I'm not asking you to go down that road. I'm asking you to do this. How secure is your freedom today? Lech Walesa, he's the guy who freed the Polish people. He said a couple of days ago, the days of America as the world's moral leader are over. Ronald Reagan said, if we fail, where does the rest of the world run? We cannot fail. We as citizens must pay attention and be involved. I'll leave you with this one last thought. It was the July before the Declaration of Independence was signed. It was 1775. John Adams was again away from his wife when he wrote these words. A constitution of government once changed from freedom can never be restored. Liberty, once lost, is lost forever.